Once in a while, a little candy, candy. Once in a while, a little candy's good. Temps en temps, du nanan, du nanan. Temps en temps, du nanan, c'est bon. Temps en temps, du nanan, du nanan. Temps en temps, du nanan, c'est bon. Temps en temps, du nanan, du nanan. Temps en temps, du nanan, c'est bon. Monte en haut, Rosé, monte en haut pour te coucher. Go upstairs, little Rosie, go upstairs and go to sleep. Les barreaux sur ta couchette, c'est papa qui les a faites. Monte en haut, Rosé, monte en haut pour te coucher. Side rails on your cradle, they were made by your dear daddy. Go upstairs, little Rosie, go upstairs and go to bed. Temps en temps, du nanan, de temps en temps, du nanan, c'est bon. Temps en temps, du nanan, de temps en temps, du nanan, c'est bon. Once in a while, little candy, candy. Once in a while, little candy's good. Once in a while, little candy, candy. Once in a while, little candy's good. Monte en haut, petit Joe, monte en haut pour faire dodo. Go upstairs, little Joey, go upstairs and go to bed. Le piqué sur ta couchette, c'est maman qui l'a fait. Monte en haut, petit Joe, monte en haut pour faire dodo. The quilt that's on your bed was made by your dear mommy. Go upstairs, little Joey, go upstairs and go to bed. Temps en temps, du nanan, de temps en temps, du nanan, c'est bon. Temps en temps, du nanan, de temps en temps, du nanan, c'est bon. Once in a while, little candy, candy. Once in a while, little candy's good. Once in a while, little candy, candy. Once in a while, little candy's good. Once in a while, temps en temps, du nanan, c'est bon. So that's called du nanan. So when I was growing up in Lewiston, Maine, there were all kinds of songs that were sung. Some of them were short, silly. Some of them were long songs. People would gather around and they'd tap their feet. And that kept the beat. And if there were people dancing or fiddlers or accordion players playing, it kept everyone on the same beat. And it's pretty much a 1-2-3 beat. Temps en temps, du nanan, de temps en temps, du nanan, c'est bon. Temps en temps, du nanan, de temps en temps, du nanan, c'est bon. The instruments that were played during these little gatherings, these little family sessions, most often did not include guitars. Mostly the instruments were the voice, the feet, occasionally a fiddle, occasionally an accordion, but my favorite instrument to play, the most portable one, in French is called a guimbarde, guimbarde. Some people call it a bombarde, and other people call it a ruine babine, which means ruin your lips. And this is how it works. Mon papa ne veut pas que je danse, que je danse. Mon papa ne veut pas que je danse la polka. Which means, my papa doesn't want me to be dancing, to be dancing. My papa doesn't want me to be dancing the polka. malgré cette défense, moi je danse, mais malgré cette défense, moi je danse la polka. Mon papa ne veut pas que je danse, mon papa ne veut pas que je danse la polka. Even though he says no, I'll keep dancing, even though he says no, I'll keep dancing the polka. He can say what he likes, I'll keep dancing, he can say what he likes, I'll keep dancing the polka. Il dira ce qu'il voudra, moi je danse, il dira ce qu'il voudra, moi je danse la polka. Mon papa ne veut pas que je danse, mon papa ne veut pas que je danse la polka. Mon papa. The stories that were told most often in our family had to do sometimes with journeys. So, for instance, there was a story about mon oncle France, Uncle France. And he was kind of a hero in the family because he had come from some little village in Quebec to the United States in a fairly unique way. He had a large family, so he had decided to do what many men in Quebec did during that time, late 1800s, early 1900s. They would come to work in the textile mills in places like Lewiston and Fall River, Woonsocket, Rhode Island, Lowell, Massachusetts, and they would work for a year or so and make enough money to bring their families down with them. Well, Uncle France didn't have much money at all. He didn't have enough money for the train trip. So what he did, according to family lore, is he bought a ticket for as far as he could go down the line, to the next stop down the line. And he bought also some bread, some sandwich meat, and some mustard. And as the train rolled along, he made sandwiches and sold them, so that by the time he got to the first stop that his ticket was good for, he had some money to buy another ticket to the next place down the line and enough money to buy some more sandwich supplies. So he made and he sold the sandwiches and bought tickets for the next place down the line. And that's eventually how he came to the United States. I guess the journey took him 4 or 5 days, but he was the sandwich guy, and we always heard about him over and over again. He was a big hero, and he was such a good worker, supposedly, that he was chosen as the person to cap the chimney on a new textile mill in New Ipswich, New Hampshire. And so this guy was somewhat of a legend in the family. So these were what I call kitchen table stories. That's the kind of stories you'd hear when people were just gathering and were just talking for the sake of talking. Other stories were more along the folk or fairy tale groove, I guess you could say. My grandmother used to tell us stories about des lutins, and those were little elves. And these little elves, their specialty was to steal away in the night with the farmer's horses and carts. And the way the farmer knew that the lutin had taken the cart and the horse out for a midnight ride was that the next morning the horse's mane, the crinière, would be braided. And some folks said that being used in that way by the lutin would make a horse stronger and longer lived. Other people said it wasn't good for the horse at all, that they would just shrivel up and die within months. So these were some of the folk legends, and my grandmother seemed to know a lot of these. My mère parent knew a lot of those. And she talked also about the loup-garou. And the way she spoke about the loup-garou, we as children were convinced that there was probably one lurking around the next corner. The loup-garou were werewolves, a werewolf-like creature, a human being that, according to French-Canadian Catholic legend, was a person who had not perform their religious duties. So they would be punished by being turned into loups-garous at night. Another kind of story that was told was the, well, there were the journey stories, so there were the kitchen table kind of stories, there were the folk tales, the fairy tales, and sometimes people would just make up stories for the fun of it. I remember being a kid and having uncles and aunts, mostly uncles, who would just make up these outlandish stories. Other times the stories came from books and they were adapted for us. My mom would tell her versions of Cinderella or Cendrillon, and my father made up stories, and they usually involved somebody in the neighborhood or some incident that had taken place, and they would embellish it, and usually to teach us some kind of a lesson. Okay, so as a grown-up and as a storyteller, I have invented some stories, and but I think what I'll do is I'll tell you a short one that is very typically French. And this kind of reflects the personality of a kind of ethnic person. It seems there was a truck driver, and he was going back into Quebec from having been in the United States, and he had a large 18-wheeler, you see. And as he re-entered along the frontier in Quebec, he parked himself in the line that said, "Nothing to declare." And the border guard, le douanier, as they called him, approached him and says, "Vous n'avez rien à déclarer, monsieur?" And the truck driver says, "Ben, I'm in the line that says nothing to declare. It is because I have nothing to declare, hein?" And the border guard says, "Ouvrez les portes de ce camion. Open those doors." And the truck driver climbs down from the cab, opens the doors, and what did they discover but a full-grown African elephant standing in the back of the truck. This full-grown African elephant has one slice of bread in one ear and another slice of bread in the other ear. The border guard looks at the truck driver and says, "You call this nothing to declare?" And the truck driver says, "Oh, now you're going to tell me I can't put what I want in my sandwich?"
Talking with Michael Parent, or Michel Parent,
Oui.
and Michel has just returned from a conference, the library conference held in Falmouth.
Yes.
Perhaps you can give me the official name of that. Mass Librarians Conference.
I think that's close enough.
And Michael hails from, would you prefer Michael or Michel?
Well, for today, let's do Michel.
Michel, okay. Michel Parent hails from Lewiston, Maine, where he was raised in a bilingual family and has utilized those resources and that rich cultural tradition as part of his own art and his development as an artist and as a person. So this is what we're talking about today.
Mm-hmm.
This interview perhaps may not have a linear thread, but it certainly has an interesting circular thread.
Fine. Any thread is okay by me.
And Michel, when did you realize that tradition that you were raised in, which is the same tradition I was raised in? I was born in Quebec, raised in a Quebecois Franco-American household in New Bedford, Mass. Realizing the importance of it somewhat as I grew up, but not fully till many years later. When did you first realize that this was something that you could nurture and cherish?
Well, ironically enough, distance seemed to have been a key. I moved from Maine to Virginia in 1979 or thereabouts, and at the time I had been telling stories for a couple of years as a way to make a living, telling stories and singing songs. And in the next few years, having been away and then coming back to Maine 2 or 3 times a year to visit family and to do storytelling presentations, I realized how unique this Franco-American culture was. My parents, my grandparents, the aunts and uncles who still survive go back and forth, as I'm sure your family does, between French and English. And sometimes they speak French and English in the same...
On appelle ça
Franglais.
le franglais.
Oui,
But
oui.
it's a fusion and rich in its own right.
Yes,
It's
absolutely.
a different language in a sense, a different rhythm to it.
And you know what? There were a couple of moments when I realized I was doing a stage play that I wanted to base on my grandparents' experience.
Mm-hmm.
And I was collecting songs and little anecdotes from my aunts and uncles at these little family gatherings. And at first it was just songs. I just wanted songs. And I would have them sing a song for me that I wanted the verses to, and then I would shut off the tape recorder until the next song. And there was a moment where I realized I shouldn't shut off the tape recorder at all because the talk between songs was so interesting. Because I realized that when this generation of people dies, that very unique fusion, that franglais, that patois, won't exist anymore. You and I can probably imitate it. I know I in a joking kind of a way, sometimes with my cousins, we'll do the franglais.
I think we can pass it on. You and I and other writers and folks who use the word to share the language and the rhythm of that language. It can be
Yes.
passed on, never as the original. It always
Right.
goes through a transformation,
Right.
but I think that's part of our goal in being here today as well, is to pass that on.
Yes, absolutely. And so that was a moment where I realized, okay, the talk is as important as the songs.
Yes.
And so I began to get much more focused about getting certain stories about the family, filling in some gaps in my own memories about some of the family members. And at one point I had all these stories written down, transcribed from the tapes, and I had them all. I was at Laval University in Quebec, looking through the folklore archives, and I was writing this play, this one-man play, and I had all of my notes up on this cork board, bulletin board in the dormitory, and it all sort of came together. I was there to study folklore, but all this family material started coming together. And I realized, for instance, that my Uncle Joe, who was my godfather, had so many stories about him that he deserved his own show almost. And that I just saw how it all came together, and I realized that the person who should be the teller of the stories should be my grandfather. So during this program, this show that eventually was called Grandpa's Birthday, I played my own grandfather, which was really quite affirming and wonderful for me, although he was long gone. He died when I was 11 years old. But it was really affirming for me because I really felt like I was carrying not only his memory, honoring his memory, but also carrying his memories and sparking other people's
Oh, it was
memories.
very interesting as a concept and as a reality to time frame something in that way and to flash back and still be here now and communicate the story that way. I think it's very interesting. When you talk about the Uncle Joe and the wealth of stories that focus on Uncle Joe, I think some of these folks were characters. They were shaped very much by the environmental changes and the immigration process. They became even more characterized. But interesting, folks. But one question I have many questions for you, but one that I do have, because you mentioned Laval, that I'm familiar with as well. In choosing that as a place to do your research, did you find more similarity or discrepancies between the Quebecois culture and the Franco-American culture that you were trying to give voice to?
Oh, I found tremendous similarities. I found that some of these old expressions that I thought we only used and that had fallen out of favor in Quebec and France. I mean, I knew, having traveled also in France, that there were certain Franco-American expressions in French that were no longer used there, that were referred to as being from the 16th century. One, embarque dans ma char.
Well, je comprends ça, embarque dans ma char.
Yes, hop into my car.
Into my wagon or my car. Right?
Yes, right.
These days, what's the car?
Absolutely, embarque dans ma char.
Embarque, disembarque. I think it originated with folks using boats as a means of transportation.
Yes, they were
to